This is a summary. I know you're not going to be able to read the fine print, but let me tell you what this says. Basically what it shows is going up to about the year 2007, actually, we had, in the previous 5 years, 4 out of those 5 years, we spent more money than we took in. So it's the most basic rule of any household finance or government finance. If you spend more money than you take in, you're going to use up all your surplus, and you're eventually going to run a deficit, and you're eventually going to run the city right into a crisis. And that's exactly what happened. Every single year, 4 out of 5 years, we were spending our surplus down. So in the black line that you see here is actually our surplus. So you can see our surplus, which is doing pretty good in around 2002, and it starts diving. What you're also going to see is that 2010 is the 3rd year in a row where we did something very basic, but it was difficult to achieve, and that is we spend less money than we take in. We save money. And our surplus has gone from just a couple $100,000, which was dangerously low, to about $1.5 million for 2010. And we did this at a point in time when all of our revenue, from our income tax to our property tax, was all flat or declining. We are the only suburb in Northeast Ohio that has had this kind of fiscal turnaround. The only one. And so the achievement that's been done between Council President Butler and the rest of City Council and myself to actually go in a little bit more than 2 years, when you have declining revenues, to overcome a deficit and actually build up a surplus, it's unheard of. If you pick up any newspaper, you'll see other cities still in 2010, almost 2 years into our economic crisis, are still laying off employees, are still furloughing, and we are actually building up a surplus back to the way that it should be. So we're very, very proud of that. Now that's what the challenge was. How did we do it? Well, 80%, our strategy was really to get a hold of personnel costs and all related costs. So 80% plus of our budget was personnel. We had to get a hold of the situation. And then we tried to basically evaluate any spending that the city did and go through a very rigorous process of re-examining it. Let me give you some examples, specific examples of what I'm talking about. These are our healthcare costs. Every single year they were going up, and in the last few years they've been going up double digits, 8-10% a year. It's not sustainable. We'll have 3 years in a row this year of declining healthcare costs. Again, talk to other public entities or agencies. It just doesn't happen. Overtime. We looked at all of our staffing, no matter what the department was, and said, why are we incurring overtime? And how do we make sure that before overtime is incurred that we've done anything possible to avoid paying overtime through logical and rational planning of work schedules and so forth. And we have reduced overtime in the last 2 years by 42%. It's an incredible reduction. 27% fewer employees as of this day than 2 years ago. 27% fewer. The only department that increased in the last 2 years was the police department. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Every other department got smaller. And now we're at the point where when there's a request for rehiring, we can decide whether or not we want to do it by attrition. That's the way it should work. If you want to get smaller, you should do it by attrition and do it over time. But because we were faced with a crisis, we had to make very difficult decisions. Now we are actually in the position of being able to hire back people that had to be laid off. So, for instance, in our Public Works Department, we're ending up, because of attrition, we're now able to bring people back. So in the long run, a lot of these people will be able to regain their job, but in the short term, we have to make some very drastic decisions. We were able to do that by leveraging technology, making people more productive, and basically eliminating a lot of bureaucracy. This may be a little hard to read, but one of the things we did also was we looked at every single vehicle in the city, and the vehicle had to be justified. We went from 647 vehicles to 515 vehicles. We save on maintenance, we save on fuel, we save on the number of people that have to operate those vehicles. It's very important. At the same time, we were very aggressive about pursuing state and federal grants. We went from about $3 million to about $9 million in federal grants, and we were able to fund a lot of programs by getting more federal money, getting more of our share of federal money. Now, part of that we were helped because There's been a federal emphasis through the stimulus funding and some other federal programs that we were able to do. But part of it was also we were just more aggressive about it. Every director knew that they had to go out and look for funds and look for grant proposals to try to fund their operations or do new services, and we were very successful with that. This is something that I call just promoting excellence. We wanted to change the culture at City Hall so that you were evaluated and that you were rewarded based on your performance. I know this is not a novel concept, but it does not always exist in government. This past year, for the first time, every single employee in the city of Lakewood, for the first time, every single employee, whether they're union, non-union, doesn't matter, every single employee had to be evaluated, every single one. And that had been done hit or miss. Some departments were, some departments weren't. There were people that were hired, worked for the city for 30 years, retired, and were never evaluated. That isn't fair to anybody. It isn't fair to their managers, it isn't fair to the city, it isn't fair to the employees, because we're not able to reward them based on merit. So, first of all, we have citywide now performance evaluations. And secondly, when we started being able to give some financial compensation, we didn't do it across the board anymore. If you're doing a mediocre job, you may not have gotten any kind of increase in pay at all in 2009. But based on evaluations, you may have gotten more or less depending on your job performance. And this is just an important thing to recognize. First, you have to make sure the people coming in the door, the new employees, are high-quality individuals that have the right qualifications. And then secondly, once they're there, you have to create that incentive for excellence in merit. Even before all of the county corruption scandals that you really can't get away from, partly because of my background, having investigated that kind of thing in a previous life, I was obsessed with the idea of how do we try to design a system that isn't susceptible to inappropriate behavior, unethical behavior, or, God forbid, illegal behavior. So we started that back in actually 2008, and we try to insist on it throughout all of our processes in the county. What are some things that we do? First of all, we have one of the toughest ethics policies in the country. I don't know how it can get tougher, to be honest with you. Secondly, we not only require it of our own employees, but we also insist on it that we have a certain standard of conduct for contractors, for vendors. They have to sign an ethics policy as well. And if we find out that those policies are violated, there are consequences. I hold people accountable. If a vendor doesn't follow it, they're going to have their contract canceled. If an employee doesn't follow it, they're going to find themselves suspended or terminated. And they know I'm serious about it because I've had to do it. Rarely, but I've had to do it. And so we send a very clear message. We have high ethical standards, we insist on it, we demand it, and that's what we expect. We also have instituted some random audits on different things like cash transactions and property. So our finance department, you never know when they're going to show up at your door. If you are in a city department, they're going to arrive unannounced and they're going to check policies and procedures. And it just creates the expectation that everything has to be done by the book. Nothing else is acceptable.